Because the interesting thing about it, too, is now it's Secret of the Mimic again. I don't know why I'm doing this, but it feels right.
Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs. The Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host with the toast, Rye Toast, to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's like we always do. And I had a specific topic in mind for today's episode, that being, is Edwin Murray still alive? And if so, does that change anything? I'm also standing because I just like the energy that standing gives me, so I don't feel too sleepy or slow when doing a podcast, so here we are. Oops. It's night again. But that's okay, because it's not 2 a.m., it's only midnight, which means I'll be less eepy this time. If you're also wondering, hey Rye, why is this going up on Wednesday instead of Tuesday? Surprise, it's midnight, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. See you in like 10 hours. Regardless, Edwin Murray. So, when trying to figure out if Edwin Murray is still alive, there's a couple of different sources to pull from, right? So, initially all we had were the short stories, especially pre-Secret of the Mimic, which pre-Secret of the Mimic, we didn't really have to care about Edwin Murray. I don't believe so. But now that we have the game and we know Edwin Murray is a real person, even though the books are not one-to-one with the games or in the same continuity, there's still useful bits of information and things we can lean on when trying to figure out theories. So it's useful to know what happens to Edwin Murray in the Tales in the Pizzaplex short stories. And we really only get 2 stories that feature Edwin. The first one chronologically is the story The Mimic, and then later in the timeline would be The Storyteller. In The Mimic, we don't get much about what happens to Edwin Murray after The Mimic, because, we get the story of the creation of The Mimic, and then Edwin is beaten to a pulp, and then Edwin beats The Mimic to a pulp, and then we kind of flash forward to the people trying to reclaim The Mimic, so we don't get a lot of information there. But, we get information from the storyteller about Edwin after the fact. Because Edwin is alive in the storyteller, which takes place in the Pizzaplex era of the timeline. So, clearly in the books, Edwin survives everything that has to do with the Mimic and MCM. Well, in the books, MCM doesn't exist. It's just an empty warehouse he makes costumes out of. But you get the idea. In the books, clearly Edwin survives to the Pizzaplex. But the interesting thing that never really gets addressed in the books, and doesn't really get addressed in the games either, is there seems to be some sort of tragedy in between the Mimic and the Storyteller that we never get to hear about. So in the Storyteller, when Edwin Murray sees the face of the Tiger Rock animatronic head that is put in the Storyteller itself, he gets this PTSD flashback. Everything is oh god, and he starts seeing a bloody grimace and people screaming and all this stuff, and it sends him for a huge loop. Some people explain this as he's remembering David and David dying in a car accident. Sure, it could be, but to me, this seems way more violent and aggressive, as if there was something in between then and now that happened that he's remembering. Because we hear in the Storyteller itself that Edwin tried to do his own thing for some time. He had his own company, he's doing his own thing, but that went under, and he came crawling back to Fazbear Entertainment to get a job. So in my when I look at it, it almost seems like Tiger Rock was at some point a character that was involved with the Mimic, and something horrible happened because of it. Maybe a Help Wanted situation, and Edwin was the one who saw the aftermath, where somebody's cutting off their face and all that. Maybe it's something like that. I don't know. That's what my thinking was. My thinking was Edwin's company was hired to make Help Wanted, then the Mimic gets involved and all this happens, and now later in the timeline, Edwin is working for the Pizzaplex, and the Mimic is involved again, and he gets the flashback of what happened for the book's version of Help Wanted. That was my thinking, essentially. And again, like I said, some people just think it's Edwin having that flashback of David dying, but for me, it's so intense that I think it's more than just remembering when your son got hit by a car. I don't know. But again, all of this is the books. So the books have this timeline established. Edwin survives the Mimic, and goes off and does his own thing and comes back, and then is later, during the Pizzaplex era, Edwin is killed by the Mimic via the storyteller. That's the books. Is that helpful for the games? We have like a general vibe because of it. Like we know that it's a possibility, but I don't think it's immediately helpful. What evidence do we have in the game for Edwin surviving? Well, for one, there's no body, right? This is one of the first FNAF games that's very much readily showing the bodies of the victims of this game. They are strewn about the place. I think before this, the only ones I can think of are the sister location silhouettes, the one where the two engineers get hung by the Funtime animatronics. And like that was crazy for the time. And that, as far as I'm aware, is the only like body you see in FNAF. Besides, I guess, in Into the Pit, we see like the very edges, like the legs of the victims of the MCI, but it's like a flashback. I don't know. As far as like the mainline FNAF games go, there's absolutely no gore. There's like blood sometimes. There's an eyeball sticking out of a Freddy head in FNAF 1. But for the most part, that's something that's avoided. I mean, there's Springtrap. But you know what I mean, right? Like, for the most part, the victims, because the way FNAF works, the main story, like the victims of FNAF, are the background. They're the things that happen outside the game, and the game is dealing with the repercussions of that, right? Like FNAF 1, we're not dealing with, oh god, somebody did the MCI. We're dealing with, these animatronics are possessed, and we learn about the MCI is probably the cause, right? Like FNAF 2, we're not dealing with the DCI or the bite. Those are things that happen in the background, and we're dealing with the aftermath, the possessed animatronics. I did a whole video on this about like FNAF can never be solved because one of the biggest strengths of Five Nights at Freddy's is the story and the plot are always separate. It's that the plot of the game is usually dealing with the aftermath of the story we have to uncover. It's very true crime adjacent in that way, right? Like, we're not playing, FNAF 3 isn't, oh, we have to stop William from resurrecting. It's like, no, he's back. That happened somewhere else. We're dealing with the fact that he's back now. So because of that, FNAF never really had to show gore. Not saying it would be better if it did, but I'm kind of can take it or leave it. I think gore is as useful as any other literary device. But then you go to Secret of the Mimic, where there are, dead bodies strewn about this place, stuffed into costumes. And it makes sense now, because similarly, the plot and the story of Secret of the Mimic are two separate things. The story of Secret of the Mimic is Edwin's family and Edwin losing his mind, trying to be this genius inventor and losing everything because of it and making the Mimic. The plot is now we're dealing with the Mimic. But since we're dealing with the Mimic and the Mimic is still an active threat, it now makes sense for there to be bodies strewn about this facility. And it's done very tastefully. They're not like blood and guts everywhere, which, again, it has its place. I'm fine with blood and guts. I don't think it's ever necessary. Like, it depends on the story you're telling. And the story FNAF is telling, I don't think blood and guts is necessary, right? And I think it's also, they're able to be a bit more flippant with dead bodies in Secret of the Mimic, because the victims are adults, right? I think that's another key distinction here, is that typically in FNAF's history, the victims are children. And nobody wants to see that. Like, nobody's like when people played Secret of the Mimic, and you get into that first power room, and there's that dead body, like the arm sticking out of the elephant suit. Everyone's reaction was like, oh, this is dangerous. Hell yeah, we're endangered. The stakes have been raised. That's awesome. No one would have that reaction if it was like a dead little kid arm. Everyone would go, oh, that's upsetting. Oh, I didn't want to see that, actually. Right? Like, that's the difference here. So there's multiple compounding features as to why there are more bodies in Secret of the Mimic, right? Because, one, the victims are adults, not children. So it's more comfortable to show dead adults, frankly. And two, the current plot of the game gives reason for dead people to be strewn about, which is frankly very rare in Five Nights at Freddy's. I think that's a reason why in Sister Location we do see those two dead bodies, because that was one of the rare instances where the plot would bring us a dead body, not the story. So that was a whole rant that is really neither here nor there, but that's why the podcast exists. All this to say, Secret of the Mimic is not scared to show us a body. Secret of the Mimic is frankly almost flippant with the dead bodies strewn about the environment throughout MCM. So because of that, the fact that one of the most important characters of the story of FNAF has an audio log, not of FNAF, sorry, of FNAF Secret of the Mimic. I would not say Edwin is one of the most important characters of FNAF. He's up there because he creates the Mimic, and Mimic is the current main antagonist. But regardless, one of the most important characters of Secret of the Mimic has an audio tape where he maybe dies, and in the room where he maybe dies, there's no evidence of a body whatsoever. I admit, I don't think that's amazing evidence, but it is evidence. It's taking this, that is a reason to hesitate in assuming that Edwin is dead. That is a good reason to hesitate. I totally get that. And again, the other evidence we have from the game, he's not killed within that audio tape. That audio tape is left ambiguous. It sounds like the Mimic left him to die. And if so, that's the classic tropey blunder of a villain is I don't need to be here. You'll be dead soon anyway. I'm going to go over there where I can't see or hear you. And then the heroes escape. That is the tale as old as time. So it does sound like in that audio log, M2 tricked and tries to kill Edwin. But once the explosion happens, it's very Ultron adjacent, where M2 is yeah, no, I actually just finished my legs. You think they're pretty cool? M2, please, I'm dying. Yeah, I'm busy. I'll come back later. See you later, buddy. And it sounds like he's leaving. It sounds like the explosion worked. Edwin looks like he's going to die. I'm out of here. So that is still leaving it ambiguous. And then now, because of the most recent update, there is a goddamn shadow in the Digityper room. In the beginning and end of the game, when you're in the security office, if you look across the warehouse in the Digityper window, there's a silhouette just doing one of these. He's just doing one of these. I don't know why he's doing one of these, but there's a silhouette just doing one of these. So, who the fuck is that? I made a whole video on it last week where I was well, it can't be Digityper because Digityper is destroyed and this is seen at the end of the game, and it can't be the Mimic because you go from this security office to your van within 10 seconds and the Mimic is already in the van when you go there. So who the hell is it? The video lands on Edwin, because I think that makes the most sense. But I didn't address something that I think I should now. There were plenty of comments that brought up it could be William or Henry. Theoretically, yes, is my response to that, right? Sure, at this point in the timeline, William owns the facility, so he could be roaming around it. Same with Henry. But I hesitate to think that they would. Because think about the context in which the game exists. The whole point of this game is that Fazbear recently claimed all of Edwin's stuff, and they want to take it, but they know there is something dangerous in the facility that is killing the people they send. So they're sending random employees to go and try to capture the Mimic so it's safe to get everything else. Right? The whole point, the entire point of Secret of the Mimic is that it's too dangerous for them to go claim everything because of the Mimic. So with that knowledge, why the hell would William or Henry be in the facility at all? That's the whole reason Arnold is here. If it was safe enough to go lurk around, they wouldn't be sending random Fazbear employees who could potentially steal this IP. They are sending people who are no-names, who might die, just to try to make it safe for themselves to go. That's kind of the whole point. So the idea that William or Henry would be there right now, I don't think makes any sense. That's my thinking, and I thought that when writing the script, but I didn't address it in the script, and that is my bad. I probably should have, because it would have made the video a bit longer anyway, because it's kind of a short video, but still. So to address that, yes, William or Henry could technically be the silhouette, but I see absolutely no reason why they would set foot in that facility while getting reports about all the dead people they keep sending there, right? Like, I think they have a little bit more self-preservation. So is the silhouette Edwin? Right, Edwin has no self-preservation. He was the M2 tried to kill him. He still seems to be trying to get things together. So the idea of, Edwin maybe and consider it's the Digityper office as well. As far as we're aware, the Digityper office is double locked. There's a security lock, there's a crank lock, and the crank is disabled as well. So like whoever is in there is double locked, and the mimic never enters that room until we open the gate and open the lock. It almost is like the mimic can't get in there. And the moment the mimic gets in there, sees the Digityper, forgets about Arnold for a second. The only time, as far as I can think of, in the entire game, that the Mimic sees us, but instead targets a random robot and then attacks us, right? So, like, is that just for gameplay reasons, to show that the Mimic is not kidding around, this is a danger, and giving us a way out? Probably. But think about it for a moment. If this is the only time in the entire game the Mimic could kill us, has us completely cornered, we have nowhere to go, but instead chooses to destroy the Digityper, giving us a way out. Two things. One, it's a robot that's walking around making noise. Maybe the Mimic doesn't like that. Because, to be fair, for the rest of the game, it doesn't really happen. There's really no other robots that are self-sufficient that don't immediately get taken over by the Mimic. And, for all the billboard or cardboard cutouts that make noise, the Mimic runs right over. So, but they stop making noise. So maybe the Mimic just hates noise. That's possible. The other option here is like another possibility is that Digityper is kind of representing Edwin right now, right? Like if the Mimic is M2, which obviously at this point, yes, and M2 has these conflicting feelings about like hating Edwin, one as the parts of David within it, but also the parts of the robot that Edwin created and then hated and beat. It enters this room and it sees a masculine, human-esque robot who only works, who's actively working as they're in there. And like the Mimic's trying to aura farm and Digityper's like, work. That's very Edwin coded. Right? So it could also just be the Mimic being like, you remind me of my fuck-ass dad, take, break, smash. Like that could be what's going on here. It could be M2 having daddy issues. But there's a third option here. If Edwin is the silhouette, and he's using the Digityper office as a safe haven from M2, a room M2 has not figured out how to get into yet, well, now M2 probably knows about that. I point out in the video that M1 seems to be able to track us throughout the entire facility, and M2 similarly is able to find us very quickly. Is this gameplay related? Probably. But the idea that like we enter any room, and any room we enter in, M2 is suddenly there and starts looking for us. So it seems like M2 and M1 have some ability to track what people are in the facility. So my thinking is, Edwin, right? If Edwin is lurking around, surely he knows this place better than anybody else. He knows how to weave in between locations better than anybody else. It's his facility. But at the same time, M1 and M2 might know he exists. Granted, M1 thinks he's in the manor, so he's evading M1. But maybe he's not evading M2. Maybe M2 knows he's in the Digityper office. It's possible. And if so, when we get in there, M2's finally in the room that Edwin has been locking M2 out of this entire time, and he's not there now. Destroying Digityper could just be like a really frustrated robot, being like, I finally get in here, I finally get my hands on you, and you're not here. I need to break something, and Digityper is right there. So there's a lot of possibilities here. But Edwin being the silhouette does have like a through line, so to speak. Why he's there at the end of the game, I have no idea. But, that's neither here nor there. So the question is, if Edwin is here, if Edwin is alive, what changes? What differences in the timeline happen? Where do we go with the story from this if Edwin Murray is alive? Do I think he is? I'm on the fence. I was a hardliner of no, but with this silhouette, unless it's a new character we've never seen before, I can't think of any other goddamn reason there'd be a mysterious silhouette wandering in this office. It just doesn't make sense. So, if Edwin is alive, he's probably shown up in the DLC. Right? I think that makes the most sense. Everyone kind of expects... I mentioned this in the video, and I didn't elaborate on it. I guess that's my bad. Where everyone kind of expects a Secret of the Mimic DLC. That's kind of what they've been doing with their games recently, where they'll release a game and then wait a year or so, and then release a smaller DLC as like a holdover for the next game. And I mentioned that, like, if there's I should have said if there's going to be a DLC. I think I did, but some comments I've read make it seem like I didn't, and I haven't rewatched the video. But because I know I've gotten comments saying, like, there's a DLC, where did you hear that? I didn't. Right? Like, I didn't hear there's a DLC. There's no news of a DLC. I just kind of assumed there's going to be, eventually. Similar to Ruin, a slight expansion to this game to hold us over to the next game or set up the next game. And if there is for Secret of the Mimic, Edwin's probably showing up if he's alive. I think that makes the most sense. Are we playing as Edwin? Possibly. It could also be, we're Arnold, we're at the end of one of the endings, and Edwin is now our guide instead of Dispatch as we try to right the wrongs of Murray's costume manner and set up everything else, and in doing that, set up the next game, which concludes the Mimic's story arc, right? Because we're at a point in the story where we know who the Mimic is, we know what the Mimic's deal is, we know the Mimic's, like, motivations, its creation. We don't know why it's here, though. Right? Like, at the end of Secret of the Mimic, it's still left very ambiguous why the Mimic goes from where it is in 1979 to where it is in the Pizzaplex. There's a big gap in the middle that we have no explanation for. I have my thoughts, but it is still very, very up in the air. And I do personally think the next mainline FNAF game is the finale for the Mimic saga, right? Think about the first 6 FNAF games where, by FNAF 3, the story is really solidified as William Afton is this child murderer and he is unkillable. He keeps coming back as this now Springtrap character. Like, he dies in a Springlock suit, he's back. They burn down the facility, he survives. Like, that's FNAF 3 is showing this story. And then by FNAF 6, and so this is how the story is told, right? FNAF 1, we get the current aftermath. There are haunted animatronics because of MCI. FNAF 2, we get more background. We get, like, okay, there's these restaurants, there was Fredbear's Family Diner, this goes back a ways. Then FNAF 3, we get the introduction of the villain. Here's Springtrap, front and center. He's alive. He's still there. You try to burn him, he's going to survive it. Then you get FNAF 4, which is very discordant from the rest. I still think FNAF 4 was meant to be the end of FNAF. I still think FNAF 4 was like I think Dream Theory was real upon the creation of FNAF 4. I think it's been successfully retconned to the point where it doesn't need to be at all. But I do think FNAF 4's creation is like, oh, it's all the nightmares of a kid, which I think is a fine ending. But, it isn't. And then we get FNAF Sister Location, where in there, we get the how this is working, the why this is working, the motivations of Springtrap. And then the very next game, FNAF 6, the climax, the ending of the saga of Springtrap, Ultimate Custom Night being the resolution. Right, FNAF World sprinkled in there somewhere. It's a very common and successful storytelling method to introduce the problem, then the villain, then the villain's motivation and background, then the climax. Right? You don't want to have a FNAF 6 without a FNAF 4 and 5. Because if you go straight from FNAF 3 to FNAF 6, you're sitting there like, why is, like, he's a child murderer, but there are plenty of child murderers. Why is this guy literally the devil to the people in this game? I want to know more about this guy, and it's too late. Right? It doesn't hit as hard. FNAF 6 does not hit as hard without 4 and 5, because we have the initial problem, introduction of the villain correctly, right? Because, like, William Afton, never gets named until 6, but the purple guy, exists in the ephemera of 1 and 2. Well, really just 2, but you know what I mean. And then FNAF 3 is like here's William Afton. This is Springtrap. And that's the big reveal game. And then 4 and 5 give you the background of who this person is, his motivations, what all of this is about. And then now that we know who he is, know what he's about, FNAF 6 can give us a satisfying resolution of the story in defeating him. Now we look at the current era of FNAF. Help Wanted and Security Breach. The current issue. There is some technological thing taking over people's minds and recreating the crimes of William Afton. What the hell is going on? Help Wanted 1, Security Breach, to an extent Help Wanted 2. Secret of the Mimic is FNAF 3. Secret of the Mimic is the game grabbing us by the shoulders and saying, hey, here's your villain. Well, actually, more accurately, Ruin is FNAF 3. Ruin is our big reveal as to who the current antagonist is. We keep seeing all this stuff that the current antagonist is doing, but we have not met them. We've seen Glitchtrap. We know Glitchtrap is messing with stuff, but we don't know why. And then Ruin is FNAF 3. Ruin is the introduction to our villain. Here's your villain. It is the Mimic. And rightfully so, people are like, who is that? If you haven't read the books, you see the Mimic, you're like, what is this thing? And to be fair, FNAF 3 was the same way. Nobody knew who Springtrap was before FNAF 3. Springtrap, a yellow suit, as far as we're aware in FNAF 2, was Golden Freddy. As far as we were in FNAF 2, it was somebody put on a suit, the yellow one. And we went, oh, Golden Freddy? And then FNAF 3 comes out, there's a Golden Bonnie. A Golden Bonnie that's withered with a corpse inside of it. Who the hell is this guy? And we get some inkling. Like, by the end of FNAF 3, we have a guess that it is the purple guy, but we still know jack about him. And then we get... So, now, come back to Ruin, where we know there's this digital entity that's messing with everything, but we can't pin it down. And then we find out that there's this robot in the basement of the Pizzaplex that is able to mimic its voice and is being digitally suppressed within it. This is our villain. What's its deal? Well, now we have Secret of the Mimic. Secret of the Mimic is our FNAF 4, FNAF 5. This is the game being like, here is what the deal, the creation of the Mimic, why it exists. And I think Secret of the Mimic will have a DLC that will show us the current connection. The whole okay, here's everything we know about the Mimic in 1979, the DLC, or I guess technically it could be the next game, a DLC or next game. The next release will be here's how it connects to now. Here's how the Mimic's motivations are meshing with the current story of the franchise, where it's going, why it's going there, how it goes from 1979 to the Pizzaplex. And then whenever that comes out, the next thing is FNAF 6. The next thing is the resolution to the story, right? We have the rising action, the reveal, the backstory, the climax, and then after that thing, the resolution, your ultimate custom night, right? This is basic storytelling. It makes total sense when planned out this way. So, again, long walk, but all of this to say, the next release for FNAF, I think, is going to be either a DLC for Secret of the Mimic or a next game. And that one will connect the Mimic to the Pizzaplex's story, will give us that information, so that the next game is defeating the Mimic, in whatever way that means. And that would end the Mimic saga. I think that makes the most sense. And then that opens the door for the next FNAF villain. Whether that be a copycat killer, whether that be someone we already know, who knows? But that will begin the next FNAF saga. Although there is technically one other possibility for Edwin. If he's not going to show up in the next game / DLC, which I think is possible, Edwin, technically... I was thinking about it when typing up the notes for this podcast. And it's funny that, I haven't had I didn't know there was this much to talk about. I guess I could make this a full video at this point. Maybe I will. But thinking about it, Edwin could be already in the story of FNAF. In the Pizzaplex story. Because there's two characters that theoretically, Edwin could be. He'd be very old at this point, but that's not stopping anybody. I mean, he seems to be fairly young in the 70s, like early to mid-20s, I would guess. So he'd be roughly 60 to 80 years old, depending on the timeline. And 80's pushing it, but, you know, they're spry 80-year-olds. Regardless, he could be the arcade conspiracist we hear about in Security Breach. The worker who falls into this rabbit hole of trying to do the arcade machines, trying to rescue the princess. I could see Edwin being obsessed like that. Here's an interesting idea. I think narratively, it makes the most sense that the protagonist of Help Wanted 2 is Cassie's father. But what if it's Edwin? Right? Because, like, everything else does also line up with Edwin. Like, the only thing that doesn't super narratively cleanly connect is the connections to Cassie, right? The whole idea of, like, the last thing you see is handing the mask to Cassie. That's a wonderfully, like, dreadfully ironic ending for Cassie's dad. Doesn't really mean anything for Edwin. Doesn't really mean anything for Edwin, but putting that aside, it's somebody who works for the Pizzaplex, which Edwin did in the books. It's somebody who would have motivation and knowledge to stop the mimic. It's somebody who, you know, the key is familiar to you. Okay, the Faz wrench looks just like the data diver. That would be familiar. Especially, think about the wording here. It's not, this is a key you've used before, this is a key that you know. The wording is, the key is familiar to you. It looks familiar, not one-to-one. The data diver and the Faz wrench are very, very similar. They're not one-to-one. I'm going to double check. I made such a big deal about the exact wording. I'm going to double check that's the exact wording. Yeah, use this key to confront the darkness. The key is familiar to you. And you know what's really interesting? The Faz wrench is not a key. The Faz wrench is a new piece of technology that can reset animatronics and fix circuit boards. But you know what is a key? The data diver. And I'm pretty sure there was a poster that's literally like, the data diver is your key to the facility. And Mystic Hippo, a Murray creation, is looking at the player and says, this key is familiar to you, isn't it? Holding a Faz wrench, which isn't a key. So again, another, like, Edwin seeing Mystic Hippo, one of his wife's designs very likely, as it existed in Murray's costume manner, handing him something that kind of looks like a data diver and calling it a key. That's a connection there. The fact that if we're going through, you know, the fact that there's playable Fall Fest minigames. So either Fazbear has recreated Fall Fest, or this is some, like, archival log of a Fall Fest, or if we're going through our own memories here, Cassie's dad very likely didn't go to Fall Fest. Or at least when he did, he wasn't said, you look like you have kids, because if this is the 70s Fall Fest, Cassie ain't born yet. Cassie's dad might not even be born yet either. But if this is an actual memory of Fall Fest, who also would have gone to Fall Fest and looked like he had kids? Well, Edwin had a kid and went to Fall Fest. Right? Like, there's surprisingly really good connections for Edwin to be the Help Wanted 2 protagonist. And in this way, if this is true, it parallels the books perfectly. Because in the books, Edwin is trying to stop the mimic and getting deeper and deeper until eventually he dies because of it. And if Edwin is the Help Wanted 2 protagonist, he's come back to the Pizzaplex, he's actively trying to stop the mimic, and he dies because of it. Because in both endings, the protagonist probably dies. The first one, definitely. The arcade one, maybe his consciousness is left alive in some sort of cryostasis, we have no idea. But, like, still. Right? Like, before all this, I was almost like 100% certain that Help Wanted 2 protag was Cassie's dad. I thought it was locked the hell in. And I think it is still very likely. But I'm almost more convinced that Edwin is the Help Wanted 2 protagonist now. Because the interesting thing about it, too, is now it's Secret of the Mimic again. I don't know why I'm doing this, but it feels right. Because, in a way, if my most recent interpretation of Help Wanted 2 is correct, and it's that it is M1 attempting to flush Glitchtrap out of the system so that M1 can try to reset M2, if that's what's happening, M1's whole plan in Secret of the Mimic is to get Edwin to reset M2 for her. And here Edwin is again, trying his best to do so. Edwin is in here like, hey, I'm trying to also flush out Glitchtrap so we can fix M2. Which would make sense why he goes along with the secret pathway. And then we can even connect it with the Candy Cadet story. You know, the woman who faces off against the witch, is left scarred because of it, comes back much later in life, but is tricked by a little boy along the way and is killed. Edwin and M2. Edwin and M2. Now, I think it needs to be pointed out that it's interesting that this story features a witch in a cabin in the woods, and then in Moon.exe, Sun/M1/Fiona is depicted as a witch who lives in a cabin in the middle of the woods. That's an important connection. We'll need to get there. But just stay with me for a moment. Just smiling, friends. Listen to me. You need to listen to me. But if it's Edwin and M2, then following this story with the track of the games themselves, I feel like I'm having a brain blast in like live action right now. Edwin faced off against M2 in a way. M2 leaves Edwin scarred. Much, the legs, the whole like, I can't feel my legs, he's under the rubble, he was hurt badly because of this. Much later in life, Edwin comes back to the Pizzaplex to face off against the Mimic to try to shut it down. Much later in life, the woman goes back to the woods to face off against the witch again, but is led astray by a boy. Helpy. Is led astray by Helpy and falls for Glitchtrap's plan, trying to end Glitchtrap in the first place, and becomes the witch's supper. Help Wanted 2 might be Edwin. Maybe that's... Oh man, I wasn't planning to make that a video, because I feel like, I don't know, but there's apparently a lot to talk about. Maybe that's next week's video. Because, look, I'll be real. This week's video, 2 days, it's the Abyss. It's the Abyss stuff. The Leon Riskin teaser. That's huge. That's this week's video. Next week's video? Hey, maybe Edwin's the Help Wanted 2 protagonist. I don't know. I'll sleep on it. I'll write on it in the morning. But, like, I feel like I just had a whole brain blast. Holy. We have questions to get to. I don't remember the last time I did a podcast episode where the topic took this long. The recording's at 40 minutes. The last podcast episode was like 36 minutes and it was all questions. I don't remember the last time I had a topic that like, maybe I got to record at midnight more often. Maybe that's when my brain juices flow, dude. That's crazy, actually. Anyway, we have questions to cover, but also, shit, I don't have any on me. GamerSupps, GamerSupps. Code RYTOAST for 10% off your whole order. It's really good stuff. I drink it like twice a day. Granted, they have caffeine free and non-caffeine. Wait, sorry, they have caffeine and caffeine free. Okay. So the thing about caffeine, there's a safe daily limit. You should not go over 400 milligrams of caffeine in a day. That is not good for you. You shouldn't even approach it, but you shouldn't go over it. You should not go over it. I see you. Jared, who's had 2 white monsters today. I see you. No, thank you. That's bad for you. The nice thing about GamerSupps is they have the caffeine versions, which is 100 milligrams of caffeine per serving. So you can have, I like to have 2 of them at lunch, which is under the daily limit. And the thing about caffeine you have to keep in mind, there's a 6-hour half-life. That's something people don't talk about. We'll get to that after. I want to finish the ad first. There's also caffeine free. So I'll have the 200 milligrams of caffeine at lunch, but if I want more GamerSupps, like I wanted for dinner because we had pumpkin chili and I wanted a flavor, I don't know what's getting into me right now, but we're going to stick with it. I had a caffeine-free version. I had 3 servings of it in the shaker cup because you can fit that really nicely with ice and then shake it. It was delicious. And I didn't have too much caffeine because it was caffeine free because they offer it. Code Red was 10% off. Okay, here's a quick PSA that people don't talk about. Caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours. 400 milligrams of caffeine is not a daily consumption level. There shouldn't be that much of it in your body. So here's an example. If you have coffee for breakfast and an energy drink for lunch, you might be getting into trouble here. So let's just do some quick math. If your coffee with breakfast is 100 milligrams of caffeine, that's, I think, pretty average, because I think a cup of coffee is anywhere from 60 to 80, but, a lot of us have big, tall cups of coffee. So let's just, for easy math, say your morning coffee is 100 milligrams of caffeine, and you have it at, for easy math, 9 a.m. Actually, I'm going to go super easy on this math. You wake up at 6 a.m. to get ready for your job, and you immediately drink an entire cup of 100 milligrams of caffeine. Okay, cool. You have lunch at noon. By noon, you don't have 0 milligrams of caffeine in your system. It is a half-life of 6 hours, which means every 6 hours, the amount of caffeine in your body is halved. So, if I drank 100 at 6 a.m., by noon, I still have 50 milligrams of caffeine in my body. This is where we get into danger, because a lot of energy drinks will have 300 milligrams of caffeine. Some of them have 350. 350, I think, is like a monster. I could be wrong. But say I drink a 300 milligram energy drink at lunch at noon. Now I have 350 milligrams of caffeine in my body. So at noon. So then by dinner, I have 175 milligrams of caffeine in my body at 6 p.m. And then at midnight, 6 hours later, I have, what would that be? 75 plus 12.5, so like 87.5 milligrams of caffeine in my body. Then by 6 a.m. the next day, I still have 40-ish milligrams of caffeine in my body. And then I drink my daily cup of coffee, which is 100 milligrams of caffeine. But actually, it's essentially 150 milligrams of caffeine now. So when I get to lunch, I'm at 75 milligrams of caffeine. And I drink my 300 milligram energy drink, I'm at 375. Then by dinner, I'm at one. This snowballs. If you don't get to 0 or very low, because obviously half-lives never really get to 0. If you don't get close to 0 by midnight or by the time you wake up, you will always be slowly adding more caffeine. I want to interrupt this for a moment. I'm very stupid. So I'm also not a nutritionist. I could be wrong. This is my logic throughout the day. This is what I think of. So maybe I'm wrong. Correct me in the comments if I am. As far as I'm aware, this is correct. Because I had a time when I was substitute teaching and doing YouTube at the same time, which I did for the first 3 years of the channel, where I was getting really tired a lot. So I did this. I had a double coffee for breakfast. It was a big thermos. I filled all the way, coffee, creamer. Filled that thing. It was like 150 milligrams of caffeine probably. And then at lunch, I forget the brand, but I had an energy drink that was 350 milligrams. That Friday, I blacked out for the first time. I did that for an entire week. And on Friday, I blacked out for the first time. It was brief. I was streaming. So I have the clip of it. If I can find it, I'll throw it in. It's very funny in retrospect. But
Overkill, but worth it.
Oh my god, I laughed so hard I got dizzy. Holy shit. Oh wow. It was a week of doing this. I was sleep deprived as hell. I had too much caffeine in my system, and I laughed so hard late at night that my body just shut down for a second. And I came back up before I hit the desk. So I shut down, I'm up. But I had never blacked out before. That was the first time I had ever done that. I have not drinking an energy drink since then. I drink GAMERSUPS, but it's a drink that has caffeine in it. It's not like a canned energy drink with 350 milligrams or something crazy like that. It is something you can control how much caffeine you're intaking, which is why I like working with them. But I have not drank like a traditional canned energy drink since then. I was supposed to do questions, and then I talked about caffeine for 8 minutes. We got to do at least one question. We have to do at least one question. What's a question we can do somewhat quickly? Oh, God, not that one. Okay. Sure. Old mate, he, him. Thank you for your question. If you want your question, it's on the podcast. Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. It's in the description. Copy, paste, paint, type out. Anyway, old mate, he, him. What's your opinion on Michael Afton still being alive? I don't like it. No, but is it technically possible? Yes. It is specified there's a way out for him. But is it narratively possible? No. He's dead. Let him be dead. I can at least see him possessing Glamrock Freddy. Do I think that's what's happening? No. Do I think it's likely? No. But I'll give you Michael Afton possessing Glamrock Freddy. That's a possibility. That's at least narratively possible. Narratively, I guess, satisfying if you like that. I don't personally. That's fine. Michael Afton being alive? No. No. No, I don't like that. And frankly, realistically, I don't see any evidence for it. I think the best evidence you could possibly scrounge together for Michael Afton still being alive is Gregory's, my friend knows the layout. Listen, I'll tell you instructions. Could that be Michael Afton? Sure. Is it Michael Afton? It better not be. No hate to anyone who likes that, though. I don't see it. I don't see it. But, old mate, thank you for your question. This is a weird podcast. I don't know if it's because it's midnight or just the vibes are weird. I'm very hyper tonight. I don't know why. But until next time, as always, thank you for... The customer service, it's anyone who's worked customer service knows immediately the vibe of chilling and then immediately locking into just the, but until next time, as always, thank you. Because I've always said this, that like a lot of content creators, myself included, put on a voice a little bit, right? But I don't like to call it putting on a voice. I always say it's your customer service voice. And that's just like being a good presenter. It's just being good for a camera and a microphone. It's not playing a character. It's not lying. It's what you do when you work a register. It's customer service. Because what is content creation if not en masse customer service? I'm providing a service, entertainment, and like, I guess if the caffeine thing isn't bullshit, education. So I always say that like the YouTuber voice is just a customer service voice in a different font. Like that's all it is. Why am I going on all these tangents? Anyway, thank you for watching the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. We hope to enjoy your future patronage. Bye-bye for now.